Welcome to the Entail AI podcast. Discussions with marketing executives sharing their latest techniques for growing their businesses online.
Welcome to Intel Podcast, where we often host and interview marketing leaders from different companies, often SaaS companies or e-commerce companies. Today I have the pleasure of having Lora Osborn, Senior Director of Marketing at Synterra. Hi, Laura. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here from cold Minnesota, right?
Yeah, we're trying to stay warm.
Okay. So before we start, maybe you want to take a minute and introduce yourself, speak a little bit about your experience and so on.
For sure. So I've been in the marketing world for about 20 years. Always say my first half of my career was spent in public relations and marketing communications. And then I made a switch about 10 years ago into product marketing and corporate marketing in the SaaS world. So very much focused on, how to do market positioning, sales enablement, more of the traditional marketing flow, all around lead generation, conversion, making sure that we're taking marketing leads and closing them as opportunities to drive revenue for the company.
Okay. It sounds very cool. So I wanted to talk to you a bit about the marketing trends that we see in 24. I mean, there's a lot of talk around AI, and then there's a lot of changes happening in the marketing world. You can see companies letting people go because of cutbacks, but also in specifically in marketing, we see, we see that also with our clients and with prospects that we speak to, because Intel sells marketing platform. So a lot of companies are also cutting back on their marketing expense, and which means they're letting people go, and also they're really thinking long and hard before they start investing or before they keep investing in different channels. And it seems to me a couple of years ago, where money was cheap and all the companies were flush with money, and then they weren't really that critical over their acquisition costs. So they were spending much more on marketing, and now that's definitely changed. So maybe let's start with just in general, how do you see the landscape in that sense?
Yeah, I think we started to see the landscape shift a little bit towards the end of last year. I think there was over 600 tech companies that had done layoffs. Obviously, not all of those impacted marketing, but already this year, I think I saw a stat last week that there were 47 tech companies that had done layoffs. So layoffs is definitely a big component of what's happening. And marketing are, part of those. The teams are getting impacted because, as you said, the resources are not what they used to be. And I think a huge driver behind that is tech companies are really starting to focus more on how they can be profitable, where, over the past decade or so, it's really been more about revenue generation. Let's see, how much revenue can we be generating? Let's not worry about the profitability or the bottom line, because if we can just say we're bringing in that money, we're going to look really good to our investors. But I think, as we started seeing the venture capital dollars kind of shrivel up a little bit and become a little bit more tighter because of the market conditions, it's starting to impact the way that we're thinking about marketing and the way that we're looking at how we are acquiring those customers. And, before it used to be, let's go, and do road shows. Let's take as much funding as we can to try and bring in new customers, and marketing teams are going to have to be a little bit more cognizant around, okay, what is the actual cost of acquisition and what are the channels that we're using that are actually going to drive people in?
Yeah, it's definitely a trend that we've seen more and more with clients. It's even smaller startups that have basically just shut down, and it also had to do there. I saw a few companies in the Shopify app space. There was also
right.
Yeah, so a lot of companies were very excited to develop new tools for Shopify, but then everybody all of a sudden realized, okay, there's about 2 million Shopify stores. Out of them, just a few 100,000 that are really successful. So it's not a very big market, and there's a lot of apps and tools chasing those software. And then as the market shifted as well, what I saw it from a few clients, I think about 3-4 in that space, that the acquisition costs went through the roof. It used to be let's say $100, their acquisition cost and per customer, and it went up to like about 500. It's like went up like 5 times, and it completely ruined their business model, and a few of them just went out of business because of that. So that's already like one place where you see like this change in the economy, like affecting companies. And so for other companies who had like were like a bit more that were a bit more mature, that can withstand this change, they basically cut down on marketing and started like making sure that their marketing is more effective and they're not just spending money where they don't have ROI. But so first of all, do you think this is something that affects especially like SaaS companies rather than e-commerce companies, or do you think that affects everyone across the board?
I think e-commerce is probably facing a little bit of a different challenge because as we look at, inflation and some of the issues that are happening there and just some of the market dynamics, I think consumers are tightening their purse strings a little bit. So e-commerce needs to respond to that. So, as you're thinking about the apps that you can use with Shopify, a lot of people are looking at it like, okay, what can I get by with for free? Like maybe it's not the Cadillac, maybe it's just the Chevy, and it's going to get me where I need to go, but it's not going to have all the bells and whistles. And I think that's how people are starting to look at things. And yeah, I think, talking about ROI is so important from a SaaS perspective. About a decade ago, I was working with a SaaS company and our cost per lead was about $6. And I remember, we reported into the chief revenue officer and he thought that was crazy. He thought that was too high and we had to figure out how can we drive that down. And in recent years, I've been looking at $700-800 for cost per lead, and that was okay. But I think we're going to start to see that shift as we go back to what are those channels that are a lot cheaper to bring in those leads and how can we qualify those faster so that we're not spending all of that additional capital that we might not have because we don't know what this investor picture is going to look like in the coming months.
Yeah. I mean, so that's also very interesting because I see that as well. I mean, definitely in e-commerce where you say like people are spending less, so they're also like they're affected quite. I mean, they're the beginning of the chain. Usually like SaaS sells, let's say, to e-commerce stores. So then you're like you get the secondary effect. But I definitely see companies spending less on Meta, for example. Together with the change in economy, there's also change in all the privacy regulations and so on, cookie-less world and all that, which makes targeting on Facebook much more difficult. So companies are spending less there, and they're looking for alternatives. Definitely everyone that can invest also in influencers. But what do you think in terms of of different channels? Where do you think companies are turning to right now instead if they don't want to spend so much money on Meta, on Facebook like they used to before?
Yeah, I think one shift that I'm starting to see is a bigger focus on organic search. So where you can get wins from SEO. I think that's always been really important because, if someone's searching for something in your industry, obviously you want to come up. But just like you said, with those privacy regulations, it's making it really hard to justify spending the dollars on Meta or the dollars on LinkedIn when you know that you might hit a fraction of who you're targeting before. So the best bet is, you want to have that holistic marketing strategy, but starting to shift that spend so it becomes more of that content first strategy so that, you have ownership of how you are driving people to your site and how people are getting to that content. But I think we're going to continue to see more of a shift in that way. And I also think, as we look at account-based marketing, that has been a really big shift over the past 5 years where, every organization is now using a tool to help support that. And I think doing that in different ways is going to help make it more productive because I think that is where we're starting to see a lot of the costs when we're looking at the cost per lead because those programs tend to be really expensive. But looking away at how you can partner with sales to make sure that you're driving that account-based outreach without having to have, a fancy swag pack or, a fancy virtual party. But what can you do to still give that account or those contacts the right attention and make sure that they understand your value prop, but you're also serving them in the right way without spending all of your resources that you have.
So that's very intriguing to me. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit about the account-based marketing techniques. Do you refer to like SDR activities, like reaching out to people, let's say, on LinkedIn or through email, or like what type of activities are you speaking about there?
Yeah, so I think, in recent years, there's been this shift to basically, gift or have swag or have, special events for the strategic accounts. So, we're going to throw a virtual wine tasting for, our top 8 accounts and see who we can get on the phone and who will join us. And let's start to build those relationships. And, I think, that's been a really good way for us to go back to that traditional marketing of really doing that one-to-one interaction that has been lost in a lot of the digital channels and the mass media that we've, turned to in the past 15 years. But I think what people are realizing is, okay, it's working, having that one-to-one conversation and having that ability to get in front of them and wow them and give them, the VIP treatment, like that works. That gets people excited about what we're doing. We can have that conversation with them, but they're also taking a look at the budgets and they're saying, okay, that's working, but it's also eating up the majority of my budget. And I need to figure out a happy medium. So, SDRs, I think, are fantastic. It's a good way to start that conversation. Generally, they're not ready to go from A to Z in that initial, conversation that they have. And so it's taking a look at what are some of the other methods? Like, do you have like industry specialists that you're able to get on the phone and help there and provide that, VIP experience without having it break your marketing budget at the same time?
Yeah, it seems like, on one hand, you have all the advancements and AI, and everybody's talking ChatGPT this and ChatGPT that. But then when you really speak with, we speak with real marketing leaders, you see that there's quite a big shift in the other direction of like going back to the basics, back to authentic, back to the like human connection, to like really to like being real in a way, and away from let's say just the ChatGPT type of marketing. Even though if you just Google, ChatGPT marketing or AI marketing, if you look at the TikTok, YouTube, whatever, you see all those like get rich quick schemes,
Yeah.
But I mean, I must tell you, since it started, one of the ways we analyze this, and I had a lot of like discussions about this also with clients and even like arguments about this, because from my perspective, when content is so easy with AI now, it's not just reading content, it's also like, all the effects that you can have, and editing video is much easier. You can use CapCut on your phone and you can have like pretty cool videos, like see all those shorts on TikTok. So there are enough people watch them. And so many companies, and I see that as well with some of our clients, many companies, you see how the marketing leaders in the companies get pressure from the executives to drive down marketing costs using AI. And then they start looking for the tools that will reduce the cost for them. And they end up creating content that's very much like the content that somebody without a budget can create. So if you're a big and serious company, why do you think it makes sense to create content with the same means like somebody without a budget, on one end, and then on the other hand, or to even strengthen that, the content that you're creating with these tools is very superficial. So if everyone can create that content, so where's the value? Like,
right.
In marketing, you want to be different, you want to stand out, and that's really not what you're doing. So that's why we shifted in the other direction, which is very similar to what you're saying, like to the human connection, to creating content with experts, to creating content like we're doing now, to really bring out the human experience, the unique perspectives that people have, their unique experience and expertise, because that's what other people mostly find interesting. And so it seems like this shift also, like you're saying, in account-based marketing is very similar. And then you're talking also about search and content. So that's also there's a big shift there as well, because of all the changes that are coming within Google. Even though like search, like SGE, search generative experience, it's a difficult name for that feature, but they're still rolling it out, right? It's open in the States. It's not open in all countries. It's also like you need to opt in if you want to have that experience.
Right.
And you can see that this experience is incomplete. It's not. There's a good reason why they haven't like rolled it out to everyone, right? It's not released to the entire population. It's just an experiment. So even there, organic search is going to change, and then together with that, you see that the world's attention is on social media. So that leads me to thinking that, like you're saying, a lot of people are going back to content, going back to being authentic, but they also need to go back probably, or to go, I don't know if back, but to go and invest more in social media, in the organic side of social media, not just paid, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, starting to build those audiences will be so important, because I think, as consumers, we have been trained like, okay, I found this company, it sounds really cool. Well, let me see what their footprint looks like, because there are so many opportunities where it might not be the company that was represented. But I think, having that organic social will be really important. And from a budget conscious marketer, it's giving you some free impressions and free outreach within the market.
Yeah. So I think I really like the term that you mentioned, footprint. I mean, when I look at a company, and often I look at websites, and I want, if in the account-based marketing type work, I want to look at the company and see if they're like a good fit for Intel. And I would look at their website. I would check their traffic on SEMrush, and I always check their social accounts to actually look at their footprint. I never thought of everything, like I never used this term, but I think it's the exact term for this. So you want to really look for their footprint, because usually a good business will have a significant footprint also on social media. But then, but it takes time, and it does. I mean, they say it's free, you get free impressions, but it takes time and it takes a budget to create content for social media. And also, it's also a big challenge for companies. So how do you think companies can overcome that?
Well, I do think, going back to ChatGPT, like I think ChatGPT does have a place, but you get what you pay for. And so, going to ChatGPT and saying, okay, write my next 5 blog posts. Well, what you're going to get is basically what you paid for. Like you're going to get something regurgitated back. It's not going to be right on the head for what your target market is looking for. But, ChatGPT can be really powerful to help define like, okay, here are some topics that you should consider. And then, you use your expertise and you use content strategists to help to build that out. But I think it's really important as, resources are starting to shift and things are starting to become tight. As you think about where you're spending your budgets, it's where you can get the biggest bang. And that's content, because whenever you're doing demand gen, whether you're doing account-based marketing, if you're doing organic social, if you're looking at doing third-party advertisements, what are you going to say? And if you don't have the content to feed that, those campaigns aren't going to be successful. And as you think about the content that you need, it's not regurgitating what your company does. It's not the value props for your products. It's taking a stand and being, interesting, as being educational. It's something that people are going to want to read, instead of having that one-way conversation of pushing that content out. It needs to be something that people want to engage with. And so, I think as we see this shift, it's one, figuring out how can AI and, ChatGPT and those tools work for you. And, most likely their best is helping to define those topics, helping to find, lists of the top strategic accounts that you should target from a new segment, or, helping to come up with some of those content nuggets, but then having the right people who can really help to flesh those out so that, you're able to actually appeal to who you're trying to target, instead of having the flowery language and the broad topics that we know ChatGPT is so good at.
Yeah, I agree, and I also agree with what you're saying about the content needing to be informational and educational. It needs to be interesting, because I often say that that's really the currency that you have as a brand. I mean, you're not Netflix. I mean, you're not creating entertainment. You can be entertaining as well, but that's not your main goal. And you're not doing, I don't know, any other type of content. It's really about as a brand, you often want to create, I mean, unless you're a fashion brand and you're showing models, or a sports brand and you're showing athletes, usually as a brand, you want to inform your audience, and it works well for brands that sell products where people really need information as part of their buying process. And again, I'm using this word brand all the time. So what do you think in terms of branding and positioning for companies? What do you think the best methods are? Do you think it's really mostly about content, or like what other, like from your experience, what other techniques would you use like to really like establish that brand identity?
Yeah, I think content is really important, because like you said, that's how you can create like that content personality and really show like, this is who we are. Whether, we want to be educational, say you're targeting a marketing leader, you know that the marketing leader is extremely busy, doesn't have a lot of time to, read through deep guides and that sort of thing. But if you have the right topic, and this is true of anybody, you're able to get them interested. So they're going to click and they're going to read. So I do think content is going to be a really important piece of that. I also think earned media, so through media relations and getting placements in third-party publications or on broadcasts or podcasts, I think we're going to continue to see that be really important to building that brand identity, because I think we're starting to see that shift back to where consumers are looking for how they can validate trust for different organizations. And, at the end of the day, marketing, we sell to the person. So yes, we're in B2B, we're selling, technology to leaders in SaaS, but there's still people, and they want to validate and make sure, is this legitimate? Is this real? And when you're doing earned media opportunities, you're getting that validation from a third party, and often at a much lower cost than what you would if you, paid for an advertorial or an advertisement. So I think we're going to start to see a shift in that direction. So just a different form of content. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're going to start to see that content is going to continue to be kind of the cornerstone of what marketing teams need to do to make their strategies come to life this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, because I agree. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying, and it's just funny that in the world of like ChatGPT, where basically content should have been free and almost like not interesting anymore because it's all over, it's generated automatically, it's become the most interesting thing, and also one of the most interesting things to nail, to get it right, to get the right content that's interesting and not just fluff or, like I say, regurgitated content from ChatGPT. But and then you also mentioned trust, which I want to touch on a little bit later, because I think it's one of the key things now in the AI and all the misinformation age. But also about just going touch a bit more on earned media, because I don't really have a lot of experience in that. So you mean like using your content and publishing it on publishers, on large websites, and I mean, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, as we look at B2B SaaS, everybody is in an industry niche. And so it's taking a look at that industry niche and finding, the trade publications where those decision makers go to get information that they need to do their jobs, and finding ways where that content can be published as a byline, or maybe you have a spokesperson internally who can speak to a particular topic, but finding ways where that content can live elsewhere instead of just on your website. And again, from, an SEO perspective, a search perspective, that helps you with that footprint and building that out. And so I think, that's something that, kind of took a back seat, I think, in the last 5 to 7 years. And I think we're starting to see a resurgence as people are starting to see the value that creates, because it's that third-party validation of, hey, this is a topic that ABC company has come up with, but this, well-respected industry publication, they're also talking about it. So this company is on the right track. So being able to align yourself in that way, I think, is going to be really powerful.
So it's a lot of basically PR, like to get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've seen that shift quite a bit. I mean, I think it used to be about, let's push out a press release and let's see, who we can get to talk about what we're talking about, from a product perspective, or, hey, we're trying to do some issues management. Let's get ahead of it. But I think there's just a little bit more, authenticity that can come with it of, having that be a solid part of your marketing strategy overall.
Okay. So, I mean, also probably like activities like creating content for, I mean, I'm thinking for my company, it could be relevant, like search engine journal and so on, those types of publications, just creating content there, because that's part of like some of our audience, that's where they hang out, that's where they go for information.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that's definitely an interesting technique. And so I want to go back to that. You mentioned trust. And I think, like I said, I think it's a major issue. I think like 24 and beyond, there's going to be a lot about brand and trust, because everything in one hand has become so easy. And it's also very easy to mislead people and to create, like fake information. So I think trust is going to be the most important currency for businesses if they can really establish authority and trust. And I'd like to hear from you if you have like what do you do? Like, what would be the techniques that you would use to do that?
Yeah, and I think like from a marketing perspective, this is for some marketers, this is part of their day to day, and for others, this is kind of out of their wheelhouse. But it's getting on the phone with customers and with prospects and understanding who they are, and what are the things that keep them up at night. This kind of goes back to traditional product marketing of trying to understand who your ideal customer profile is. But I think oftentimes, having those conversations falls to the bottom of the list for marketing professionals because you have so many other things that are going on. But I think having those conversations, that extends that trust because it makes that customer feel like, oh my gosh, you actually do care about me. You care about who I am as a person. You care about the challenges that I have with my business, and you're here to actually help me. And having that additional touch point, especially somebody who isn't trying to sell them and trying to upsell them to the next product or trying to get them to pay more money. Customers value that. And I think that's how, as marketing professionals, we can help to build that trust. But it also gives us a lot of good insight into what's actually happening in the market. And so as we look at our messaging, as we look at our content, as we look at our demand strategy, that is probably the easiest and cheapest way to get the insight and the market research that we need. And it's great for the customer too. So I think finding ways to have more of those conversations of getting customers on the phone. I mean, I think there's always, a conversation of where NPS should live in the organization. Should it be something that customer success owns? Should it be with support? Should it be with marketing? And, marketing can fight to have that so that they're able to have those touch points with customers. They get that feedback of, okay, how are we doing? And that customer responds to that survey. And you can use that as a touch point to go back to them. So, even for those outside of marketing, I think just continuing to show your authentic self as a corporation and show we have real people who work here and we have people who care about what you're trying to achieve. That's what you're going to see as the differentiator from, other companies in the market. And, we see that with a lot of companies today, like Chewy is one of those brands that we hear about a ton of, they do so well because they interact with their customers. They know their customers. They send birthday cards for dogs. Like they do what they can to make their customers feel special. And I think that's how you build trust. I think that's how you build that authenticity. And I think that's how you build a marketing program that stands out in a year where, we're starting to see those resources constrained. We're starting to see, a diluted marketplace with a ton of messages thanks to ChatGPT and a lot of AI tools. So like, going back to those basics, I think will be so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. And I think also, I mean, what comes up from what you're saying, which I agree with is if you want to become a brand and if you want to be trusted, then content is really a must, because for people to perceive you, I mean, that's how people perceive you, from your
right,
content and from, because that's how you look, that's how you project yourself into the world, and as a business. Because otherwise, I mean, I don't know Laura, and she may be a very talented woman, but if I don't know what you're thinking or your expertise, then I don't know if I can trust you. But if when you're speaking and where you're sharing information, you're sharing expertise, and you're doing it like where you do it as content, it's basically also free. That's the only way for people to really perceive who you are. I mean, there can be recommendations. They can have you can get like these badges from G2 or from those sites.
yeah,
But it only goes so far. It's also an indicator. But that's also very interesting, because when you look at how Google works and basically how topical authority works, like with websites, because when we work with websites on creating content and SEO, it's very difficult to get websites to rank for competitive keywords and competitive searches, as long as they don't have authority. If they have authority, it's much easier. You can see, for example, Forbes. They have this section, Forbes Advisor, where they compare products. So they're competing for keywords like best website builders, best loans, credit cards, dating apps. Super competitive searches. Okay, that people also spend a lot of money PPC on those keywords, and they rank very well because of Forbes incredible authority. So it's really about that topical authority. So it's very interesting, like, because the way you put it is I think very much like how Google works in a way. And that's also, but on social media, that's a bit different, right? On social media,
Yeah.
it's more about it depends on the platform. But like, how do you perceive it on social media? Is it more like a combination of like the authority, the information, also the entertainment maybe you're providing, and building followers? Like, how is that different there?
Yeah, social media is such a boon. It's so tough because I think it depends again on that brand and the brand that you're trying to build. So, some companies, they want to use social media as a way to engage and interact so people know that that brand exists. I think others use it as a way of, I'm just going to push out my news and I just want people to be able to come here, see all the cool things that we've done over the past couple of months. And then there's also that educational aspect. And I think trying to do too much with your social media can be kind of a perfect storm where it becomes too much for the prospect or the follower to take on because they don't really know where you're going to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as you think about your social media strategy, yes, you want to be active. Yes, you want to be engaging, but how are you going to be engaging? And a lot of that depends on kind of your brand and your brand identity. And I also think, one of the things that I've done is not all of your social media channels have to be the same. Like you're able to have a different voice on Facebook versus Twitter versus LinkedIn because you might have a different persona who's following you based on which channels they interact with. So I do think there's that opportunity of, maybe you have one be more casual and more entertaining where one becomes more educational and informative, but trying to build out that strategy. Like it's not how it was before where it's copy and paste the same posts across all of the networks that you have. It's trying to figure out like, what is the best mix of this and what does that look like? And I think it really does come down to the brand.
Yeah. I mean, it's also interesting because on social media, like for example, it's an example from consumer, but I think it's very similar. I mean, I was looking for a baby stroller. I have a baby now, so we were looking for a baby stroller, and I was doing some research. What's the best stroller, and we ended up buying Bugaboo. I mean, they have beautiful products, and so when you check, they have multiple accounts on Instagram, for example, like different, like global in the US and the UK, wherever, like depending on the country you're in. And almost all of their content is like moms pushing strollers. Sometimes there's dads as well, but mostly moms pushing strollers and some cute babies with them. But I would say that's mostly like bottom of the funnel content. So for me, it's like my only child now. Okay. And I'm still learning. I had a lot of dogs before that. I love dogs, but that's my first human puppy. Okay. So there's still a lot for me to learn. And so I would expect from a brand like that to create also a lot of content on, like when should my child start like eating on their own, when they should start walking. I mean, standing, walking, sitting up, whatever, like all those topics that, I mean, I need to be educated on because I don't know yet. But from what I see on social media, most of it's not true to everyone. There's also like, the brands that really stand out. And for Bugaboo, they have beautiful content. I mean, their products look amazing. I ended up buying, okay, so I was convinced. But again, a lot of their content is just about their products. It's not really about educating their audience. So I don't know if it's because it's more like e-commerce and you really want to show like how beautiful the product is. But still, I see like tons, like billions of opportunities to educate young parents, like
right
parents. And so where do you think, how would you distribute or how would you build your marketing strategy for social media when it comes to like brand content or bottom of the funnel content, I call it often, versus like more educational content that's supposed to increase your reach and build an audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ability to build the bottom of funnel content based on kind of the customer experience. So like, case studies and testimonials, we talk about those a lot in B2B SaaS, but taking those and being able to leverage those on social media and having that voice, like that's where, we've seen kind of the biggest lift is, on LinkedIn, if we're able to talk about our employees' experiences or if we're able to talk about our customers' experiences, like that's where we see the biggest engagement. If we take that to Twitter, we're not seeing the same thing. So again, like taking a look at the different channels. And I think as you think about bottom of funnel content, there's a huge opportunity to bring in that customer voice once again and have them help tell that story. But I think there's also that opportunity to demonstrate that expertise. So, there could be an opportunity for a stroller company to say, hey, this is why, here are 3 things that you need to look at if you're shopping for a stroller, and call out their differentiators. And for a B2B SaaS company, it's the same thing. What are the differentiators? Again, kind of pulling in that product marketing language to understand how you can differentiate yourself against the competition. There are a couple of vendors that I spoke to a couple of months ago as I was evaluating some software for my MarTech stack. And it was interesting because the sales rep knew how to insert kind of, a bash against one of their competitors. So, they made a line of, oh, well, this is something that we do. And, if you work with one of our competitors, this is not functionality that they have. You have to call their customer success manager to get them to do any of this, but this is automated in our software tool. So, of course, I had a demo with that competitor the next day, and that was the first question that I asked. And they said exactly what the competitor said. Oh, you call customer success and they can help you with that. So if there's a way where you can encapsulate that and put that on your social media, that's how you can start to get those buyers to think of, okay, so I need to think about this a little bit different as I'm doing these demos. You want to do it in a way where you're not obviously bashing the competitor and saying, when you get on the phone with this competitor, they're going to say, but you want to make sure that you're being very clear of like, okay, this is how we differentiate in the market. And there's a way where you can finesse that and do that very well. And I think that's when you're starting to build that bottom of funnel content where you can start to build that authority, you can have that authenticity, and then you can show, hey, I actually understand what you're looking for and I understand what's important to you. So again, you're starting to prove the value that you're able to offer beyond the product that you have as well.
Okay. And so what do you think is the right distribution between our allocation of like content that speaks about your company, your product, your brand, versus content that's more about educating your audience and solving their problems? Because I would say that content that targets more like the audience's problems, where your product also solves their problems, but it's more about yourself. Often it's not always, depending, but the other type of content is more about like expanding your reaching new people that may have not heard about your product or haven't considered, like finding a solution to the problems that your product solves, but more like really, again, like expanding your reach. So what do you think is like the right allocation between the different?
I think like traditionally I've tried to focus more on like 2/3 of my content continues to be top of funnel content. And then, about 1/3 is bottom of funnel content. And a big reason for that is, once you're in conversations with prospects and they're kind of at the bottom of the funnel, you have your sales engineers, you have your sales team, you have other resources that you're not publishing on your website that you can share with them. And I think having more of that top of funnel content, like you said, that's how you draw people in. And that's how you're able to have that organic search so that you can basically widen that funnel on the top and get more people in so they can start to, read and understand the value that you're providing and then raise their hand. So it's an old stat. I had heard something, it was probably like 5 or 7 years ago, that like 52% of buyers do like all of their research before they finally reach out to a company. And I'm sure that number is a lot higher today, just because there's so many resources out there. So you want to be part of that evaluation. You want to come up as they're looking at that, which again speaks to the value of organic search. But having that top of funnel content will help get you there, of making sure that you're inserting yourself into that educational process.
Okay, and do you expect that that to change in a way? Because we're talking a lot about organic search. We're also in that space, and in my eyes, Google basically has like 3 priorities, because they're slowly rolling out their experiment, but they haven't they haven't released it to everyone. And in my eyes, their priorities are first to give people the best search results. Because if somebody else gives you better search results, you're not married to Google. You're gonna leave them. They lose their ad revenues, which is their second priority. So they give you the best results. Now they want to monetize. So their ads have to be super. And think about that. For you to click an ad, you have to feel that it's very relevant to your search. It has to feel as close as possible to the organic result, which I think Google has managed to improve a lot over the last few years. I feel much more comfortable today clicking an ad. Today, it's the point for most searches where I get ads. I feel the ads are super relevant and I feel comfortable clicking them. It's almost like the organic results, which is quite.
Right.
So that's their like second priority. That I mean, they can't compromise on that. That's their business. The third priority, in my opinion, is sending traffic back to the internet. So the search does not stop on Google, because Google feeds off of the content that we create, and we create that content, you could say, for Google, or Google is the channel through which we want our audience to find us. That's why we create that content. Otherwise, if TikTok, YouTube, Facebook were the channel, they are, but they're not as big of a channel as search, we would create all of our content there if Google did not send traffic back to us. So the traffic that Google sends back to the internet is the third priority, I think, for them. I mean, so they would not jeopardize that. And so,
Right.
and so for that reason, I'm still quite confident that, companies creating content for SEO they will keep on reaping, the benefits. But the way the algorithm works, I think is going to change. Like what content ranks is going to change. And one reason is back to the first priority, giving you the best results. Now, see for yourself, and for most people, and it's basically for everyone, all of us, we prefer video content over text. And we prefer, our attention, we say that about the young generation, they're the 10-year-olds, but our attention span is also like getting shorter and shorter. So it's not just video, we prefer shorter videos. We also like to watch a film now and then, but TV series are nicer now. And then on our phone, it's just like short videos mostly. And so most of the content that people want to consume is short videos. It's videos and then short videos. And so if Google needs to provide you with the best results, in my opinion, these results will start looking more and more like social media and will incorporate more and more videos. So in that way, what do you think, what is the role of video like in 24 and beyond compared to the role of text? People will still keep on consuming text. Some information easier consumed as text. But it seems to me like we call it until we say like video first. It seems to me like most of the content production needs to become video first, because that's what we consume, also us and everyone else. So what do you think is really the role of video and how companies, and what are the challenges that you see in incorporating that into the
Yeah, I mean, we've seen video perform extremely well. I mean, the engagement on it is through the roof. I mean, of course, it depends on the length of the video, because like you said, we have very short attention spans. So, we kind of find between 30 and 60 seconds is like the ideal spot for people engaging and people being really interested. So I think it's still going to be really popular. I think it's going to be a push for people to continue to create those videos. But I think the challenge with videos is you have to have a quality video. Like, it's not just pushing something out there because you're like, I have to have a video. Like, it has to be part of your strategy. It has to have a really solid message. And if you're only doing, 30 to 60 seconds, it needs to be pretty succinct. So like, it needs to have that message as part of that. And I think that's where people are challenged, because, videos still require a lot of budget. And, until we can get to that place where people are more comfortable with maybe some lower production, or, hey, I'm just going to watch this quick video to get some insight, I think there's an expectation of, if a company is producing a video and they're sharing it, it needs to be that higher quality. Obviously, if you're on TikTok or it's an Insta Reel, you feel a little bit different. But as we're thinking about Google search and how video plays into that, I think, like, as I ramble, what I'm trying to say is that I don't think we're quite there yet for that to be the number one content piece. I think it's important, but I still think we're trying to figure out how that fits into that broader mix. And part of that is figuring out the resources, the message, and how it complements, the other tools that are being created.
Yeah, I agree. I think video is still very much challenging. You touched on some of the challenges. I mean, we started to incorporate more and more of that, and I tell you, there's a lot of challenges in, like, even just getting high quality footage. It's a challenge, and we do a lot of content with experts, so they don't always have the gear for that. Camera, lighting, mic, setting, and all that. So it's much more challenging than text. But I do think it's definitely the like a type, the this is where companies should start investing. And I think it's gonna be also more challenging in terms of budget, and also the competition there often is like you're competing with individuals, not necessarily like other brands. I mean, influencers.
Right.
So I think that's gonna be very interesting to see. And I can tell if again, like I told you, like at Intel, we're looking at finding ways to help companies to stand out, which means that you usually need to go against the grain. You can't just do what everybody else does. And it's funny how I told you, like with ChatGPT, and I told you I had a lot of discussions with customers as well about, they want to reduce content cost, and I tell them you have to go the other way around. You have to go for like high quality content, because everyone now can create content. You need to have like super high quality content that people really engage with, and so we went more and more towards like experts, instead of like trying to generate something with ChatGPT. Let's see what people have to say, because that's what I want to hear. Maybe Laura has some insight that I didn't think about, and that's I learned a lot from this podcast, like interviewing people. And so it's also interesting how in video, a lot of these tools now, they enable you to generate video from text.
Yeah.
Which comes across as very inauthentic. I saw a company of them, so I got an email from, like this security company they try, to pitch to us. And I went and I checked their profile, as I do. And I saw their YouTube full of like AI videos, and it seems like so inauthentic. It has very few views. Whereas our approach is exactly the opposite. We say, okay, you want to hear it from the horse's mouth. The easiest way for us to communicate is verbally, okay? And it's nice when you have video and you can also see that person. And turning that into content is much easier, okay? And you don't lose any of the authenticity. But the other way around, you can like completely dilute your content, So we're like, that's why we call it like video first. Like, starts from the video, starts from the expert, starts from the human experience, because that's what we're looking for in reality TVs, talk shows, and even in movies. They try to imitate, even cartoons, they try to imitate the human experience. So that's what we're looking for, and that's I think the most effective way of creating that. So that's why I also think we'll see, like you're saying, and it's funny that you think like that as well. Maybe it makes sense. That content and unique, and I mean authentic content is really the way to go. But so like kind of like trying to summarize all that. So what do you think, like more like on a general note, maybe like what are the main channels that companies should look into, like for 24? Where should they invest their efforts right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we talked about content. So taking a look at, what do you have for content today, and how are you able to basically elevate that so that it can become kind of that face of your brand. It can be that identity. It can give that brand that personality. So figuring out like, what is that content strategy? And then from there, starting to think about the channels that you want to go to. I think second is really focusing on how you can get direct to your customers. So figuring out, if you don't know it today, who is your ideal customer profile, and getting in front of them. And this is where it gets very challenging. But like I was saying before, this is where get on the phone with them, give them a call. Most people are really open to spending a couple of minutes to share, what their challenges are and how someone might be able to help them. So figuring out how you can do more of that one-on-one conversations. It's probably not going to impact your revenue, but you might, a little bit by being more customer first, but getting that insight is really going to inform the channels that you need to go to. And then I think what we're going to start to see is, as we've talked about Google shifting, like Google ads are going to continue to be extremely important. We haven't talked about that a ton, but number one, you need to have that content in order to fuel that channel. And then I think the second thing is taking a look at those third-party publications. So, either, taking a look at earned media through public relations, or are there opportunities to do more sponsorships or, co-content creation with them, of whether it's webinars or podcasts, but taking a look at how you can help work with them so they can help to validate who you are. And then I think the last area is taking a little bit more of a deeper look at organic social over paid social, just because as we see those privacy regulations come into play, how can you elevate your brand in organic social, and how can that complement everything else that you're doing? It may not be a huge lead generator, but it likely will be a good way to build that brand awareness, figure out a way to cut through the noise. You have that opportunity to do A/B testing with your posts. And it's a good way to test that messaging so that you can go back to your SDRs, your sales team, and as they're having those conversations and driving that revenue, it can help to support that.
Okay. And do you think that so when you wanna build a strategy like that, and I think we're gonna maybe like end on this note because we're over time. It's been very interesting. But do you think so how would you prioritize the channels? So you say, okay, let's say organic on social media. So would you just, start on all channels at the same time and see which one works? Or would you just select, I don't know, just YouTube or just LinkedIn? Or how would you get started or prioritize that?
Yeah, I think it depends on your resources. I mean, if you have a social media manager, you can probably do a lot more than if you are a one-person team trying to do it all. But I would take a look at, if you have data points from last year or previous years to see where you're getting a lot of traffic, and taking a look at Google Analytics to understand like what are the sources where people are coming through, taking a look at your conversion data, your engagement data, and using that. I think sometimes it's a lot easier to nail one instead of trying to do all of them at once, but trying to understand where have you seen successes and how can you build on top of that will get you probably some early wins, which I think is something that marketing teams are going to need this year, is figuring out how can we showcase our wins fast and how can we show the value that we're providing. So really honing in on the channels that have worked previously, but optimizing those with a stronger content strategy, and really honing in on what the customer wants is probably what's going to do it.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's been very interesting for me. As I said, we're always over time. And I like very much. I mean, I've learned a lot from you about the card-based marketing and your approach about content, which I think in many ways is similar to my approach. So yeah, thank you very much for this. I mean, I enjoyed it very much. And yeah, any final thoughts or anything else that you'd like to share?
Not that, I mean, I think the biggest thing, if you're a marketing leader listening to this today, like, number one, hang in there. If you're having a tough year, you've had your budget cut, you've had your resources cut, hang in there. Know that you can rely on the experts like Tom and his team that can help you get the content that you need, and lean into the data that you have. That's going to tell you the story of where you should be focusing and what you should be doing. So make sure that you're using that data and just try, because that's what's going to tell you what's going to stick and what's going to work.
Yeah, I think so. That's another interesting point because, like you're saying, if you're a marketing manager and your budget has been cut, and then you're saying that try in the end, and I think that's really the key. And I think it's difficult to do, and it takes guts as well. Where in marketing you often need to try,
Right.
And you can't always be certain what's going to work, or most of the time you can't. And it's about, what's the cost of the experiment and how long it takes. But not all experiments can be short. It's not always that you can start something today and see the results tomorrow. It may take some time. So
right.
I think that's a very big challenge for marketers nowadays, and that's where they really need to excel. I think it's a very good point.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, Lora, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.